brain work? Has this ever happened to you? Your younger sister asks you how the brain works and you have no idea? Well, fear not, because today my colleagues and I will be explaining to you how the brain works.
The first thing to know about the brain is that there are 3 different parts: the forebrain, the midbrain, and the hindbrain. The forebrain is the largest part of the human brain and handles mental processing and cognitive abilities such as learning, thinking, planning, speaking, voluntary movements, and executive functions, or whatever those are. The midbrain is smaller, but just as important. It handles reward and pleasure systems, auditory and visual reflexes, and sends messages to the forebrain to get it to act. The hindbrain, which is also called the old brain, is part of the brain that handles our vital reflexes. It controls our heart rate, our blood pressure, as well as involuntary breathing and other tasks that are needed for basic functions.
Oh, hi! I'm sure you still have questions about the brain. How do we see? What makes us understand language? You can hear the keys on my keyboard. But how did you know it was a keyboard? Well, that all comes down to the different lobes in your forebrain. Your forebrain is split into the frontal, parietal, temporal, and occipital lobe. The frontal lobe controls voluntary movement, emotional behavior, personality, attention, and the making and execution of plans. The motor cortex in the forebrain controls all your voluntary movement. The way that the brain maps out this movement is called the motor homunculus. Got it. The forebrain is also necessary for intentional forgetting. Another question you may have is, how do we receive sensory information? That's the parietal lobe, which turns messages from nerve receptors on your body into sensations that your brain understands as textures and temperatures. Your parietal lobe has a part of it called the somatosensory cortex that is responsible for processing these sensations. And the mapping of how different body parts sense things is called sensory homunculus. The reason you can hear birds chirping and understand that they are birds is the same reason that you can hear and understand the words that I'm saying. What am I saying? Never mind. Your temporal lobe is using the primary auditory cortex to send signals to the auditory association area, which makes sense of the sounds you're hearing. Back to you in the kitchen. I mean lab, John.
That's not my coffee. Anyways, the forebrain. It also has several different structures within the lobes that do different things. The thalamus acts like a switchboard, so to speak, sending the right sensory information to the proper regions of the brain. Homeostasis is a concept that is necessary for humans to stay alive. And our hypothalamus helps with this by regulating thirst, hunger, body temperature, our flight or fight response, among other important functions. The hypothalamus is part of the limbic system, which also contains the hippocampus and the amygdala. Both the hippocampus and the amygdala are in the temporal lobe and are important in regulating emotion and memory. The hippocampus is instrumental in memory and learning, and the amygdala controls our fear responses to threatening stimuli.
Similar to the Earth, which is separated at the equator and has 2 hemispheres, our brain has a left and a right hemisphere. These are connected by the corpus callosum, which transmits information between the 2 brains.
I interrupt this broadcast with vitally important information. The hindbrain has three main components. The pons, which regulates sleep, attention, and alertness, and the cerebellum, which is necessary for balance and coordination. And farther, the medulla, which controls vital functions such as heart rate and blood pressure.
The hindbrain is the part of the brain that connects to the brain stem, which connects the brain with the spinal cord. Inside the brain stem is a network of neurons called the reticular formation, which is an important relay center for vital functions.
Wait, what are neurons?
I'm glad you asked.
Neurons are the cells that relay information within the central nervous system, which is your brain and spinal cord. It all starts with the dendrites. The dendrites receive information from other cells and pass the information into the cell body. The cell body receives the information and passes it on to the axon, which carries the information, now called a nerve impulse, as an electrical signal down to the terminal bulbs, which release chemical signals called neurotransmitters, which go through a space called a synapse to interact with other dendrites and nerve receptors. To contain the electrical signal within the axon and reduce the possibility for interference, the axon is coated with a fatty tissue called the myelin sheath, which insulates the axon and keeps the impulse from being disrupted.
Wow, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah, and now, next time, when your sister asks you about the brain, you can confidently tell her all you know.
I wouldn't say confidently, I wasn't really listening.
What? So I just wasted all this time on you? You little...